Hi and welcome back to Cheeky Crypto. My name is Nick and today guys we are jumping down into the charts to take a look at several altcoins and what has been going on most recently and what might actually happen next. As I get into this video, if you find it useful and informative, hit the like button. I really do appreciate that. If you happen to be new to the channel, then why not go ahead and subscribe, tap the bell, select all notifications, and in doing so you will be kept up to date with absolutely everything that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. Now if you haven't yet joined us in Discord, link is in the description down below. It's a fantastic community talking crypto 24/7. It's completely free and I don't think you'll be disappointed by what you find down there, so why not go ahead and check that out today. And if you are looking for a little bit more from the crypto space and want to stay up to date with all the latest news, price action, etc., then why not check out the new Cheeky podcast as well. Link is also in the description down below. It's easy listening for your commute whilst you're going to the office, so why not check that out. Okay, let's waste no more time though. Let's actually start jumping right down into the technical analysis on some of these altcoins. So we're going to start things off by actually taking a look at Chainlink. Okay, so Chainlink is a real interesting one. It is a project that I really do like, and I am looking to acquire a little bit more Chainlink on the next kind of surge downwards. And here I do actually think this has actually started already, and I do think we've got some interesting kind of zones. They haven't changed overly too much, but I do want to kind of go through this in a bit more detail. So what I'll do is let me just make this a little bit bigger for you guys. Okay, so if we actually jump into this, right, we can see here that we basically have completed this fourth wave up higher. Okay, so this fourth wave being up here, it's about, $9.64, and then we started to really pull back down. Now this surge to the downside is actually quite steep, and it is it's actually very, very impulsive like in its nature. Now this, on the way down, this sheer drop down here, reaches this low of around the 13th of June. So we're a couple of weeks, about 12 days, so almost 2 weeks away from that low. Then we moved up in this corrective pattern just here, and we could be now looking at this next surge down. And I do think that our buy zones potentially are going to be lower than first thought. This might actually now become an overextended fifth wave going down lower. So I'm going to show you what I think is actually going on here. I think we have a 5-wave structure inside here. Okay, and if I actually go ahead and map that out, you can kind of see this little mini wave 1 straight down here, and I think there's actually a little mini kind of wave 4 and 5 just inside there. That's one way of counting it. Essentially, there's actually a couple of different ways of looking at this as well. You could also go wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, wave 4, wave 5. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter how you want to do it. There's overextensions in a couple of places, and essentially, we've got a 5-wave move. That's the main takeaway here, is we have a 5-wave drop. Okay, then we move up in this corrective pattern. Lots of overlap, right? I mean, it's very, very corrective in its nature, with the exception of this last little move to the upside. This actually does look like a 5-wave structure. So this actually to me looks like we are in some kind of this is definitely a 335 in here as well, or a zigzag even with a B wave triangle. So this would to me would look like a 335 structure, and it's a corrective structure. I'll use ABC for this function here just to kind of illustrate this in a little bit more detail. So basically you ended up with this A wave up, the B wave down, and the C wave just coming up here. Nothing unusual about that, but actually everything on point of what you would expect for that correction. The C wave equaling the A wave in this particular instance. So for the most part that looks actually okay. That means that if that was a completed C wave, our next directional move is down. You can see in the last couple of hours we're already starting to pull back down in a pretty significant way. So we should be, preparing ourselves for some more downward price action. Now, there's a couple of things here that we want to kind of look for, right? We have got a 5-wave drop, just this little mini one just inside here. We have then got a 3-wave move up higher, and therefore I'm kind of thinking we are probably going to have, and should expect, at least a 5-wave drop going down. So if I grab that high point, come on, there we go, and I'll move it over to this recent high just here. What you can do is you can see that if we were to come down to $5.74, that would actually mark our 3rd wave move. So we'd end up with 1, 2, potentially going down here as a 3-wave move, and then a 4th, and then a 5th, right? So we can see a 5-wave structural drop, and not too dissimilar to this move over this side. But I would be looking, and I would be expecting a 5-wave drop utilizing this initial pullback for Chainlink here. So if I take this entire measurement right from the upper side, come on, let's grab you, and then move this over to our high point just up here on this C wave, then we are actually talking about coming down very, very low, much lower than maybe we were initially kind of thinking or were comfortable with. So we want to kind of really monitor these sub wave counts here, specifically this 5-wave structure, to see whether or not actually 288 is something that we are going to experience here for Chainlink. So that 5th wave on this macro scale could be somewhere down here by the time it actually finishes. You're talking sub $3 Chainlink, right? And those kind of prices, I would be probably stacking up a very, very significant amount of Link. But for now, this doesn't change. Our 4th wave here has illustrated $3.92 to $4.85. That is still very much valid technical analysis at the moment. It really depends on what structures appear here to help us understand how low we are likely to go. So a little bit of speculation there, but Chainlink's got some pretty good accumulation zones, and these are areas I think are well worth kind of knowing about, right? And we definitely want to kind of be really focusing in on those, right? We want to make sure that we kind of acquire as much Chainlink as we can, right? But another altcoin that is performing incredibly well at the moment happens to be MATIC, right? Polygon's MATIC. Now, Polygon's MATIC is actually flying quite well at the moment. It's tracking up here quite nicely, and it's a very impulsive structure to the upside. So I thought it would be quite good to actually dive into Polygon's MATIC here, see what's been going on and what I would expect to happen next. So let's make this a little bit bigger. And what we're going to do is, so you can see here, I was tracking a 4th wave move, but a 4th wave is not allowed to cross wave 1. It basically means that our lower end spectrum here of 22 to 27.5 is no longer valid within this wave structure. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove those. So that's no longer really what we're tracking here. Now, in order for this to be really impulsive in its nature, we are trying to get higher than 71.1, okay? Right now, we're actually finding upper resistance right here at the 1.236. This is basically 61.9 cents, and we are looking at really just collapsing down, right? So we have completed a 5-wave structural move to the downside here, okay, after a 4th wave bounce. And there's a couple of different ways we can kind of count this, and one of the things I was tracking here was a macro move, right? We're looking at that as 1, that 2, this is 3, and then 4 and 5, right? But instead it looks like we might actually have to go 4 and 5 like that, and maybe that one isn't quite right, but maybe it's also just a how do I say it? It's like a 3-3-5 corrective move, as in we had 3 waves down, 3 waves up, 5 waves down afterwards. That's also possible, so I'm not going to mess around with that too much. We have got this bottom somewhere down here about 31.7 at the moment within that structure, but this bounce to the upside is very significant, and if this is just a corrective move here, this is corrective up, and then we could potentially look at more corrective action to the downside. And if that is the case, then we can, of course, acknowledge this maybe as an ABC, and in which case, if we grab hold of that high, can I grab it? No, it's not going to let me. Okay, I'll do it manually. Right there. Okay, if I grab this and I move this over to our current high, then we are talking about 26.5 being a potential low here for MATIC, right? Again, that structure would just be something like this. We come down with an A, we move up with a B, and we move down with a C. Okay, so that's a bit of speculation there. We had obviously had our accumulation. We did pull back down lower than our accumulation, so I will remove those. Those buy zones were valid. We have actually seen pretty significant profit since we hit those, so that's looking pretty good. But I am expecting some more downside now. If we bring the stochastic RSI into play, we can see this hourly chart right now is actually right in the floor. This is actually indicating that we might see a little bit of a bounce back to the upside as we retest this area here. And this area of support, as you can see, a double tap down here is kind of possible, and we could start to see maybe a little bit of a push to the upside as well. And this could be some kind of triangular pattern also forming inside this move, and we have wave 1, wave 2, or wave 1, 2, possibly 3, 4. Maybe it's an overextension. Maybe it's a 4th wave before we surge up a little bit more. But the main point for the zooming in here and bringing the stochastic is we have to take a look at the 4-hourly stochastic. It's correcting down quite nicely, so we could be looking for a surge up there. The 8-hour, however, is overbought, and the daily is also overbought. So from a macro perspective, there is a correction coming, but until the hourly and the 4-hourly are actually, telling us that we've got to move upwards to happen here, then, we should be still thinking about that positive price action. Now, finding this upper resistance right here at 1.236 is interesting in itself, but I'm not really, I'm probably going to say we've got a little bit more room to go up a little bit higher. So if I grab that low and I grab this, that high and I grab this low, we might be somewhere really in this range of about 64 to 67 cent before we actually pull back. So we're keeping a close eye on Matic. I do think that there's room to the downside, but I also think that the structure here is complete in terms of this final fifth wave low hitting our low targets already, and this is now potentially a move up. Now if this move up completes, we probably will not lose this low of 31 cent. I'm not expecting us to go down lower than there necessarily, unless of course there is a macro correction going on here, but I don't think that is the case. So if I think this might actually hold out, and when we come down and we have our correction, we might get close to this but not break it, and therefore this actually might mark the bottom right around that 31, I think 0.7, is it 31.6, sorry, as our actual bottom here for Matic. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out, how deep of this correction is likely to go. At the moment, if I take that low position, if I can grab it, he says, grab that low and we grab the high right up here on the nose, we've moved pretty much 100% at that point, so we've been doing incredibly well. We'll be looking for some kind of decrease in price, whether we lose 50% or more. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how that goes, but I'm not expecting to lose the low. So at the moment we haven't got any good accumulation zones until we find the top here, which I do think is very, very close, and then from there really for Matic we want to be really looking at that next accumulation zone for the next surge to the upside. So let's actually now take a look at the next one, right? So the next coin, the next project that we are going to jump into is Solana. Now Solana is a let me actually bring that up here, right? So Solana is a project that I don't really want to get too involved with personally, but we can acknowledge that we have had this low point, very much like Matic. We could have found the potential bottom here for Solana. Now this could mean that we actually continue a surge up a little bit, and then we actually pull back down again, not coming down lower than this original low. So if I actually grab hold of this little area just here, let me grab hold of this. Okay, so that comes in at 25.86. Now if I zoom out far enough here, you can kind of see that we have, let me bring it into a 4-hourly view actually, yeah, the 4-hourly view here. Here you can see we have a 5-wave structure, a 3-wave structure, and a 5-wave structure. And what we want to do is we want to see whether or not we can push higher than 75.35. If we can push higher than 75.35 as illustrated here, then essentially that would just be a zigzag correction. Okay, it is quite a push though to do so. Okay, so it is still possible that we drop down lower. Okay, and there's a couple of things that we're really watching out for. We're about 86%, or sorry, 84% away from reaching that invalidation zone, right? If we don't reach that high, there's a high probability that we are going to drop down into an additional kind of 5-wave move. Now you can see here we've bounced from our 1.382. Now I normally like to look at impulsive structures as a 1.618. Okay, now depending on where you've learned Elliott wave theory, there's different literature out there give you different steers on this. I've always known Elliott wave theory to be an impulsive structure if the third wave is 1.618. Okay, the third wave in itself has to be impulsive in its nature. Okay, it can't be not impulsive. However, there are other illustrations out there which basically say there's a small percentage chance that a 1.236 turns into a 5-wave move and a 1.382 turns into an impulsive move, and they have kind of different levels, right? I think they say if you hit 1.618, 80% of the time you're going to go into a 4th and a 5th wave down. If you go to 1.382, I think it's like 20% of the time you still have that 4th and the 5th wave down. And I think there's like a really small, like less than 10% chance if you only hit 1.236 that you have a 4th and a 5th wave down. So the fact that we've hit this 1.382, there is a possible scenario where we actually pull back down and drop down lower. Now, when we bring the stochastic RSI into play here, specifically on this 4-hourly chart, you can see it's coming down a little bit, but we were overbought, right? And we could be looking at some kind of push to the downside to be had here. It also means that we might just have some kind of mini correction and we don't lose 25.86, right? That original low. So it's possible that what we do here is actually just correct down and have a zigzag pattern, right? Because there's too much overlap for that, so I don't think it's going to be a zigzag, but essentially we might have a correction. So if I take an ABC here, we can just go ABC, right? We might have something like this, but it's probably unlikely that we're going to go up to 75.35 under this structure, unless of course that turns into an impulsive move, which I don't think is going to. So either way, I do think there's going to be some downward action. The only question really is whether those wave structures are going to take us down lower than 25.86. At this point in time, it's too early to know, but we could speculate that there's a high probability, or there's a probability at least, maybe not high, but there's a probability that we could pull back into some lower lows. Now, if that is the case, let's actually just take the 8 hour, we're already overbought, the daily, we're overbought. So there's a high probability from the stochastic RSI perspective that we're likely to see some downward price action. Now, for that, if we take this current high, and this is going to change a little bit, so don't take this as gospel or anything like that, but if I take this current high and this current low here, we could be looking at maybe about $18.91 through to about $22.95 for Solana. But the higher that this next move pushes up, the lower this target would come, right? So if this is a fourth wave up higher, then we will pull back down lower, okay? So understand that those two things relate to each other, and for the most part, there could still be this scenario where we pull back down. Alternatively, of course, we could be looking at the very beginning of an impulsive structure, and when we pull back, we don't lose this low, and then we surge up massively next, right? So there are multiple ways of looking at it. For now, we want to be very cautious. I do think there's a high probability of downward price action. The only question is whether or not we are going to lose 25.86. At the moment, it's too soon to be sure about that, but under these structures, there's a possible scenario where we could come down into the lower ranges here for Solana. So yeah, I wanted to kind of cover this off. Obviously, we did have our AMA with our Patreon members last night. Solana came up. I wasn't able to get the time to actually go through Solana's technical analysis, so I wanted to do it here, give you an idea as what my thoughts on where my mind is at when it comes to the price action of Solana. So with that being said, let's jump into the next altcoin, right? Because I want to get through a few of these, as many as I can. I've already been rambling for 16 minutes, so apologies for only going through a handful at the moment. So let's jump down into BOBA, right? So BOBA is, again, for those who are unfamiliar, links are in the description. You should check it out. BOBA networks are a layer 2 for Ethereum, so think of them as similar to Matic, but they do things slightly differently as well. So check it out. I do think there's some pretty cool stuff going on there. It's a growing ecosystem. They're only really just starting with the marketing, but they've been building out this ecosystem for a while. Now, we were looking at this potential bottom. We've got a couple of possibilities. We actually surged up quite high. So that actually marks the end of this. We can see here that we actually failed to reach our lower targets here of 23.5 to 25.1. Okay, so that little yellow box area just down here, this one, we failed to hit it, but you can see that we actually hit our original, right, our 25.5. And if I hover above that wick, we actually come down to 25.50. So that was an exact 1.618 retracement, and exactly hitting that low. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that we've come down to our final fifth wave low expectations, and if we were to look at this as a micro fifth wave that failed, that's okay. I'm okay with that because we actually hit our macro exactly what we were expecting to. Okay, so 25.50. We have got this move to the upside, so if I zoom up here a little bit and I actually take a look at that on the 4 hour, and it might make it all fit onto the chart here, you can see we have a 1 2 3 4 5. We have that overextension on the fifth wave down, and yeah, that looks like it's kind of done. Doesn't mean that we might not move down, it just means that this particular wave structure has completed, it's finished, right? And under this particular structure is finished, we should be looking at upward price action. Okay, so for anyone who was looking at BOBA, looking for some opportunities, obviously 25.50 was a pretty good opportunity if you were able to scoop that up. Now, from that low to the current high, we've gone up 53% with BOBA, so that's looking pretty good, but I still think that there is more room to the downside. So following most of these, we still have a corrective move here on our 4 hourly stochastic. Our 8 hour is correcting down nicely. Actually, that's not too bad, and the daily does need to come down as well. So we are looking to bring the price back down. Now, Elliott wave theory only works really well when you have a fully liquid market. Now, BOBA, unfortunately, is a micro cap coin, so it's going to be subject to a little bit more volatility. So as a result of that, Elliott wave theory is going to give you a good steer. It's not going to be 100% accurate, although that fifth wave has come down exactly to the sub sub-cent level, bang on level, right? But that being said, you know, when we take a look at these real micro movements rather than the macro ones, they are harder to predict. You get these bigger kind of movements in the market. But this being said, you know, we could be looking at some kind of corrective action here that corrects us overall. So we could be looking at some kind of move to the downside next. So we moved up, we moved down, we move up again, and things like that. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to come down lower, but it is also a possible scenario where we do continue to fall back down. But for now, BOBA's actually looking pretty good. It's hit our low accumulation zones to the sub-cent level, and then we got the reversal. It's a shame that we didn't have that extra little bit there taking us into the real sub levels, but it's good to see that the macro has held up well. So essentially, yeah, my next directional move here, I think, is the continuation to the upside, at least on the hourly. The 4 hourly is looking pretty good, but at some point, when Bitcoin starts to reverse, when Ethereum starts to reverse down more heavily, we should then be looking at essentially seeing, you know, the price of BOBA pull back pretty significantly as well. But guys, if you're not familiar with BOBA, definitely go ahead and do some more research. I don't think you'll be disappointed by what you find there. It is well worth taking a look. So let's now jump down into the next one. A personal channel favorite, a personal favorite of mine as well, and that's going to be Cardano's ADA, right? So Cardano's ADA, we did speak about this one on the Patreon live stream last night in our Discord server, and you know, we have a couple of options here. So there was the scenario, the one bullish sentiment that I can see for Cardano at the moment, which is basically a WXY taking us up here towards 72 cent. I think there's a low probability of this actually happening, but it is a wave count for it. So I thought I would include it here as well. Okay, so it does exist. There is one possible scenario where we move upwards, but I think there is very, very low chances of that happening. So as I zoom in on this, we are talking about, and in fact, yeah, we hit it exactly kind of what I was talking about yesterday or last night. We basically were talking about a double top scenario happening here, right? About 51 cent. We actually hit this on, where's that high coming in at 50.97. So basically just creating this kind of barrier right up here, this resistance line. And then we're looking to pull back down. Now, because we failed to go up higher, we're already pulling back. If we bring the stochastic RSI back in, you can see that we're starting to lower down on the hourly. On the 4 hourly, we're bringing that down as well. So we've got some corrective action. We are looking at about 39.3 on the lower side. That's kind of where I think that correction is likely to end. The 8 hours pulling back a little bit. The daily, of course, is heading up into the overbought area. So I still think there's some room to the upside to be had here. But first of all, I want to see a little bit more corrective action. Okay, I want to see us pull back down. And until we actually come down lower than 40.19, then essentially our macro potential move upwards still exists. However, the hope is, or there's hopium out there that we actually do have this, I think is very much not really the case. I think that essentially what we're going to do here for Cardano is continue to move down towards our lower targets of 28.3 to 34.2. Okay, so I would expect our daily stochastic RSI with some volatility within the 8 hour and the 4 hour to kind of hit that overbought area and then bring us down into the low ranges for accumulation. Obviously, that macro 22.23 cent ADA is still possible. There isn't much that we can kind of really talk about there other than the fact that we can't see the waves of structures of how we get there yet, other than on our 8 hour chart. If I bring this up, this bounce here and this WXY or just the W here basically indicates us moving down towards 22 cent. Okay, so we also have this move as well. So if we actually take this all the way from $3.10 all the way down to this initial pullback, the bounce, and then the further decline, where we are right now is effectively just a middle area before we continue this move. So it is still possible that we move down to those low levels. It's not something that we can really ignore. It would actually put us down at about 92% from the previous all-time high. And then from there, really, we're talking about progression to the upside once this correction is done. So from an accumulation point of view, The first area of focus that I can see is about 28 to 34 cent. That's the key area. I think that we're going to see some activity, some bouncing. Now that basically is this little yellow box area just here. And if I bring it across, you can see that this is also an area of consolidation back in early 2021. So I do expect to find a lot of support and resistance in this area. So I think first it'll act as support. We'll bounce up from it. We'll retest it. And if we were to lose that support, that's where 22.23 really comes into play. And again, you know, if you break and lose that, you are talking about 15 cent at that point, really testing that wave one high. So we want to be optimistic. So I'm focusing really on this yellow box area now at the moment, 28 to 34 cent. That should then actually bring us into their really good accumulation zones. We'll see how we react there. I expect a bounce at that point. Whether that bounce is actually strong enough to get us moving on out of this danger zone, or whether or not we'll just collapse down from there, is yet to be seen. But essentially that's where ADA is right now. And I'm really confident long term on Cardano. I think that as this ecosystem grows and develops, it's going to eat a lot of market share up from other smart contract platforms. And I do think that Cardano is going to be one of the main, if not the main, blockchain of the future. Now, obviously, there's going to be future developments and things like that that have to go into it. It's definitely not necessarily the most energy efficient. It's really not going to be the cheapest. It might not be the most secure, but it has a fantastic community behind it. And when it comes to the people and the community aspect, that is something that many other projects really lack. They've really struggled to kind of get that element correct. So regardless of whether or not you know, it's going to be delayed, or whether it's going to have, you know, 100 or 1,000 or 2,000, 10,000 dApps being built on it, you know, right now is yet to be seen. But what is being developed right now that's going to be ready for when that future requires it? And I do think that Cardano is kind of going to be one of those key players in the space. Many projects during this bear market are going to disappear. It's an unfortunate element of these kind of winters, and you know, that's actually pretty good for the space as well, right? Sometimes you know, weaker projects will just die out and the strongest ones will survive, and that's really where I put Cardano. So for me, accumulating at any of these low prices makes a lot of sense, in the same way that it was when I was buying Cardano way back in 2020, right? Good accumulation zones with massive appreciation afterwards. So that's kind of where I place Cardano. And let's actually move on, right? Let's take a look at another channel favorite to a degree. I don't get to talk about it too much, but I really do like it. But it does have some issues currently. So let's take a look, right? So this is Avalanche, AVAX. Now, AVAX on this macro scale, let me actually bring it up into an 8-hour chart, right? We can see, if I bring this in, right, we can see that we've pulled back pretty significantly, very, very much so. In fact, I'm going to tidy this up a little bit because some of this is not required anymore. Some of these smaller moves, they're just not really needed. And now in here, we've got this pretty decent correction. It is now actually, like Ethereum, an impulsive structure down, which means that what we're experiencing right now is a bounce to the upside. It's a significant bounce, but it's a relief bounce essentially. And what that is going to be telling us is that we are likely to see new lower lows. So unlike some of these other altcoins where they kind of finish their structures, here for AVAX, it hasn't finished the structure, and there's a high probability that it has to drop down lower in order to get the right correct momentum and buying power back to move further forward. So for Cardano, for AVAX here, unlike Cardano, we have to actually see this kind of reverse back down. So think of AVAX kind of mirroring what Ethereum is doing. So if you're watching my Ethereum updates in the morning, you'll have a pretty good idea as to what is going on here when it comes to AVAX. So what I do is I'll jump into our hourly chart, because this actually shows you all of this wave counting going on, right? And there's a lot of it, but I'm really going to focus in on this wave 3 move. Okay, and this wave 3 is basically a 5-3-5-3-5 structure. And basically, as we touch this lower or this higher range just here on this 1.236, we bounced up. Okay, this bounce to the upside I'm marking up as a fourth wave inside or just after that fourth wave, we usher in a final 5 waves down, where I would expect a 5-3-5-3-5 structure to take us down into this lower range. Now, we have, of course, just moved up ever so slightly higher here, and it's still possible that we continue to do so because we are oversold on our hourly chart. So it's possible that we continue this motion to the upside in what looks like a zigzag pattern, very similar to what Bitcoin is doing. Okay, so we continue that move up here with AVAX, and then I think we will be pulling down really significantly. So at the moment, under this current structure, let me actually just remove some of this noise that we don't need anymore. So that there is our 5th wave low just there, which is our 3rd wave. Okay, this here being our 4th wave. At the moment, just up there, and then we'll pull in those 5 later. So essentially, what we've got is this low target of about $10.32 to about $12.30. Now, obviously, this can change. It will change quite a bit based on how high that 4th wave goes. For those who understand Elliott wave theory, they'll know that there's a relationship between wave 4 and wave 5. Wave 5 typically goes to 1.236 to 1.618 of wave 4. So therefore, the higher that wave 4 moves, the lower that wave 5 goes. Likewise, if wave 4 doesn't go that high, then wave 5 will not be as deep. Okay, so essentially these two things relate to each other. So once wave 4 is completed, we'll know how low to expect wave 5 to go, and of course we know what we're looking for in terms of the structure to the downside as well. So for AVAX here, there is a little bit more of a accumulation zone, and some more downside price action is due, and this price action essentially is what is going to take us into potentially a really good bear market low position for accumulation ahead of the next big surge. And I do think that AVAX Avalanche, in the same way that you have Cardano, is going to be a key player for the future. The technology that Avalanche has is something that I think many retail investors actually need to do some research on. Essentially, it is fantastic technology doing some fantastic things, and I do think it's going to get a lot more adoption in the coming years. So if you're not already familiar, do some research on AVAX. I don't think you'll be disappointed by what you find down there. Now, guys, I have been going for about 30 minutes, so I'm going to call that the last altcoin for today in this particular video. If you have found this useful and informative, hit the like button. I really do appreciate that. If you happen to be new to the channel, then why not go ahead and subscribe, tap the bell, select all notifications, and in doing so, you will be kept up to date with absolutely everything that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. And also, guys, I want to leave you on one additional note, and that is that I am not a financial advisor. I cannot give you financial advice. All I can do is give you my thoughts and opinions on the data in the charts as I see it. It is important that you do your own research and maybe seek financial advice from a proper financial advisor if that is what you want to do. Guys, with all that said, done and out of the way, I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.